Don't think for a moment that I forgot about our Anne girl. We pick up right where we left off, episode 2 titled I Love Pretty Things. It continues on delivering pure, wholesome, positive, friendly, heartwarming, smile-inducing, watchable, has been done before but still really great, full of innocence and sweetness and childhood and innocent and purity. I'm running out of superlatives. Somebody please get me a thesaurus because I am certainly not Anne with an E and I do not have her gift for gab. Episode 1 ended with Anne narrowly avoiding being handed off to yet another unloving home, with Marilla's change of heart giving her a tentative lifeline. But as episode 2 opens, Anne is still living under the shadow of uncertainty. She tries to go about her morning as usual, but the tension is bubbling under the surface. Every chore, every quiet moment is haunted by the fear that she might still be sent away. In the book, this emotional breakdown makes even more sense. Marilla had told Mrs. Blewett, "If we make up our mind not to keep her, we'll bring her over or send her over to you tomorrow night. If we don't, you may know that she is going to stay with us." So, when Anne finally blurts out, "Oh, please, Miss Cuthbert, won't you tell me if you're going to send me away or not?" It's not just drama, it's the cry of a child who's on edge. And when Marilla finally says that they've decided to keep her, Anne breaks down in tears of relief in a really, really sweet scene. Once again, we do not get an opening, but that means that they can squeeze a little bit more story into this episode, which is nice, and I am all for it. Cut to the next day, and Anne is exploring the garden and admiring the roses. The scene is not necessarily found in the book, as it's brought together from lots of different parts and dialogues. For example, the bumblebee tumbling out of the flower was from the chapter Anne's bringing up is begun, when Marilla sets Anne down to memorize the Lord's Prayer, only for Anne to get a little sidetracked by the sight of a bee tumbling out of the flowers that she brought into the house. This detail about the Scotch roses is small but significant later on in the book. These Scotch roses were brought over from Scotland, where Matthew and Marilla's parents are from, and they were planted by their mother. The book also goes into great detail about Anne's exploring and roving about the forest, the orchard, the paths, the brooks, all the garden. Suffice it to say that Anne is delighting in the beauty around her. But, as with all things Anne, the peace doesn't last long. Mrs. Lynde makes her unwelcome entrance, wasting no time before ripping into Anne's appearance, especially her red hair. In the book, she's been sick for 2 weeks before emerging to meddle, but the anime skips straight to the drama, and Anne's response is as fiery as her hair. And here's a little line that they left out. "You have hurt my feelings worse than they were ever hurt before, even by Mrs. Thomas's intoxicated husband." Wow, that's a line. Imagine being compared unfavorably to a raging alcoholic. Yikes. Anne explodes in a fury, and Anne, though shocked, handles it much better than most adults of that time might have. Once Anne is out of earshot, she actually defends her to Rachel. She says, "You ought not have twitted her about her looks," an act which surprises her as much as it surprises Rachel Lynde. The anime skips this, but before she leaves, the helpful neighbor gives Marilla some advice when it comes to child rearing. "If you'll take my advice, which I suppose you won't do, although I've brought up 10 children and buried 2, you'll do that talking to you mentioned with a fair-sized birch switch. I should think that would be the most effective language for that kind of a child. Her temper matches her hair, I guess." Marilla's instincts didn't quite agree, though. The amiable suggestion of the birch switch, to the efficiency of which all of Mrs. Rachel's own children could have borne smarting testimony, did not appeal to Marilla. She did not believe that she could whip a child. No, some other method of punishment must be found to bring Anne to a proper realization of the enormity of her offense. Just imagine how that kind of punishment would have affected the fragile bond that they have. It would have been disastrous, especially for someone as sensitive as Anne, who already has endured so much unkindness. Marilla punishes Anne by saying that she won't be allowed to go out of her room until she apologizes to Rachel Lynde for a girl like Anne, who's sensitive, imaginative, who thrives in the outdoors, and who has definitely suffered from neglect and lack of human warmth in her life, this punishment might not be devastating, but it's still tough. It took Matthew's intervention to help Anne along and have her agree to it. And by the way, I really like this little tidbit where he's tiptoeing about. Anne's legendary roast-turned-apology to Mrs. Rachel Lynde might just be one of the best apology scenes I've seen yet. Anne doesn't just say, "I'm sorry," but she puts on a whole Shakespearean monologue with tearful theatrics. Watching Mrs. Lynde blink in confusion while Anne still reaffirms that she was still in the right for calling her those things, I don't know, that was very satisfactory. Rounding out Chapter 8 events, I like the quiet moments that Marilla and Anne have on their way back home, and where Anne also slips her hand into Marilla's. The book says, "Something warm and pleasant welled up in Marilla's heart at the touch of that thin little hand in her own, a throb of the maternity she had missed perhaps. Its very unaccustomedness and sweetness disturbed her." In the book, Marilla tries to clear up the sentiment by saying, "Remember now to be a good little girl now," or something to that effect as a way to smooth over the emotion of the moment. But in this adaptation, it's refreshing to see her not deflect, just quietly allowing herself to feel and not push Anne away. In my review of the first episode, I noted the lack of breathing room, the need for moments for the characters to just simply be. This episode let us have that in this scene, for which I'm very, very grateful. That short scene, without flashy animation, without grand dialogue, gives us exactly what we needed, a glimpse of the fragile but growing bond between them. And seeing Anne relish the thought of being able to go home and being able to belong somewhere, I don't know, it just made me really feel something in my little heart. So wholesome, so sweet. The second half of the episode follows Anne's first Sunday at church. She's a bit disappointed that her new dress, made by Marilla from bargain bin fabric as noted in the book, isn't very pretty or has puffed sleeves. Still, her spirits lift at the thought of possibly meeting Diana one day and gaining a bosom friend. In the novel, Anne is supposed to meet Mrs. Lynde at her house so they can go to church together, but she loses track of time while making a flower wreath for her hat and arrives too late. Mrs. Lynde has already left, and so Anne ends up going to church on her own. The book takes its time exploring Anne's vivid observations of the church service, many of which are actually pretty funny and surprisingly on point, to the point that Marilla can't bring herself to scold Anne for the irreverent remarks because deep down, they echo thoughts that she's quietly had to herself. Though she does scold her for the flowers in the hat. And then comes one of the episode's most heartwarming moments. Anne's first meeting with Diana Barry, a cute, kind, book-loving neighbor. The two girls click almost instantly, and in true Anne fashion, she wastes no time before dramatically asking Diana to become her bosom friend. They seal the deal with a heartfelt theatrical oath of eternal friendship, marking the beginning of one of the most iconic relationships in the series. By the way, I'm loving the visuals so much. I dig the crayonesque vibe and all the flowers in the garden. They do give life to the description that Ellen Montgomery gave of Diana's garden. Furthermore, as someone who sees shades of Ascendance of a Bookworm's mind in Anne, both are imaginative, headstrong, and deeply, deeply emotional in a way, it's especially delightful to see another bond between literary kindred spirits forming right before our eyes. It just fits. Diana's intro may be brief, but I'm already really liking her. She's the grounded counterweight to Anne's chaos gremlin energy. Somebody even commented saying that Diana is what happens when the quiet kid agrees to befriend the class chaos gremlin. And this gremlin is about to disrupt the quiet kid's life forever. It's all so unbearably sweet. And while this kind of scene could easily feel cheesy in another series, here it lands pretty much perfectly because Anne's sincerity makes even the most theatrical moments feel authentic and endearing. Meanwhile, I am loving the Cuthberts as well. Marilla, whom you guys know is one of my favorites, she continues to own her role as the grumpy but secretly soft tsundere mom. She scolds Anne, yes, but she also defends her when it counts. Matthew, meanwhile, oh my goodness, I want to hug him. He is radiating best dad energy. He quietly nudges Anne towards maturity with unconditional support and a little bit of sly humor. His smug smile at the end when Marilla admits that taking Anne in was the right thing to do. I love that. Frame that. This series continues to cover a lot of ground in a single episode. Not a story beat or moment is wasted. Lines like, "I love pretty things" and "I hate to look in the glass and see something that isn't pretty," they hit hard. I mean, Anne's insecurity is there. She needs to belong, and her fiery refusal to be mistreated, it all bleeds through her actions and her words. She's not just a cute protagonist, she's a kid wrestling with trauma in real life. And this episode respects that side of her without weighing the story down. This won't be the first or last time that I say this, but the emotional core of this series truly lies in the dynamic between Anne and Marilla. Yes, because Anne, though she's staying at the Cuthberts out of, their charity case, you could say, she is doing some good in that home. Marilla is a woman who, by her age, has settled into the quiet certainty of who she is, where she belongs, and what she permits herself to feel. But Anne's presence, so vibrant and volatile and unfiltered, yes, shakes things up for Marilla, bringing to life things that she had kept buried. The book actually goes so far as to say that Marilla had an underdeveloped sense of humor, which Anne's presence absolutely unearthed, and Marilla ends up being a more lighthearted woman, let's just say that. One particularly moving moment from the book that was sadly cut out from the episode, and it happens just as Anne had her outburst and Marilla has to go up there to talk to her. It says, "It was a dreadful thing for you to lose your temper like that, Anne," said Marilla. "Just imagine how you would feel if someone told you to your face that you were skinny and ugly," pleaded Anne tearfully. An old remembrance suddenly rose up before Marilla. She had been a very small child when she had heard an aunt say, "What a pity she is such a dark, homely little thing." Marilla was every day of 50 before the sting of that memory had faded. It's in these quiet confrontations with her own past that Marilla begins to change, not just as a caretaker, but as a person. And while some of these insights are left on the cutting room floor, we can see Marilla's softening by the expression and the delivery of her lines, which I really appreciate. Anne brings chaos and color to this world, yes, but she also brings healing, and more often without even meaning to. And that, more than anything, is what makes their growing relationship so rich and deeply satisfying. This adaptation of Anne Shirley is managing to do a lot of things in spite of going at a really, really fast pace. But so far that hasn't detracted my enjoyment of this series. In a season full of overdone tropes and recycled leads, Anne is the bold, poetic hurricane that we didn't know we needed. So if you weren't already sold on Anne Shirley after episode 1, this second episode is sure to slap with a school slate any doubt out of your heart. Actually, that's a spoiler. Oops, that's for next time. So just click here for that review. Click it. See you then.